Welcome to Surviving Roots, the podcast where we navigate the messy, beautiful work of healing and growth. I'm your host, Cari Fund, and this is your space to breathe, reflect, and find strength. Whether you're breaking free from old patterns, healing from loss, or rebuilding your story one small step at a time, you're in the right place. So take a deep breath, give yourself this time, and let's uncover the tools to move forward with courage. This podcast is for you. Today on Surviving Roots, I'm sitting down with someone who doesn't just talk about grace and grit, she embodies it. Julie Helms is a global business leader who built her career in the oil and gas industry, often as the only woman in the room. She started college at 15 and went on to work across 5 continents, mastering the art of influence in high-stakes, male-dominated spaces. But instead of adopting the masculine energy around her, she built her own strategy, one rooted in grace, authority, and composed communication. Julie's content on Instagram has gone viral for a reason, whether she's showing you how to respond when someone scrolls their phone while you're talking, or how to deflect a backhanded compliment without breaking a sweat. Her approach is sharp, powerful, and refreshingly elegant. But what I love most about Julie is how honest she is about her journey. She was once known as the Pitbull in pumps, and today she's opening up about how she found her voice, softened her approach, and still held on to her strength. So whether you're trying to find your voice, refine your presence, or just stop walking on eggshells, this one is for you. Welcome, Julie Helms.
Thank you, Cari. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on the podcast, and I really love what you're doing with your podcast and your social media content, the message you're sharing about embodying our true selves, which healing is a part of that process, and embracing boundaries unapologetically.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm so honored that you're here today. Thank you for your time. You know, I have to share that we have actually met before in person. We are part of we're both members of this group, Creator Method, and we met at an event in Miami, and I am just so happy to know you. We have a lot of similarities. I really am inspired by your content and your journey, and we actually have collabed on a reel before, and we share a literary agent, which is amazing. So we have a lot of little connections, and I'm just so happy about those.
Well, the reason we share the same literary agent is because of meeting you at that event in Miami. I don't know if you remember this, but when we first met in person, we followed each other and liked each other's content. You said something to me. You said, "This needs to be a book. When is the book coming out?" And I told you at that time, this actually is a book. It's just not been published yet, and I'm looking for a literary agent. And you told me, "My literary agent follows you." And that was Rebecca. And I didn't realize, because her handle is Day in the Life of an Editor, I didn't realize she was a literary agent, but through that conversation with you, I ended up messaging her, and that's how we got together. It was through you.
I just love that. I just love, I am so thankful for the people that I have crossed paths with these past couple of years, because somebody who it's so hard to even ask for help or like lean into other women. I just started doing it a couple years ago. So it's just like it comes full circle. And like when I met you and I see everything that you're doing on social media and in your life, I'm like, you are more than just a voice on Instagram. You are more than just a title on a spine of a book. Like you just need to be like everywhere. A book, a podcast, a speaker. Your message is so important. And I really just want to dive in, because I want everyone listening today to really gather the wisdom, the insights, and the strength that you share daily when you show up for everyone in your community. Okay, let's dive in. So, I'm all about surviving roots. So let's start with a little bit of your roots and where you came from. In our conversations in passing, you've mentioned that you've grown up with a very strong-willed, sometimes outspoken father and a very graceful, soft-spoken mother. So how did these two energies show up in your own development?
My parents were and still are complete opposites, but they've been married for many, many years. I'm not going to say the number, but they've been married for a very long time. And that just goes to show you that, number one, opposites do attract. And number two, saying the right thing or having the same communication style isn't necessarily what connection is about. But they're completely opposite. My father is a high controversy person. So as a child, he was the one that would deal with telemarketers calling the house, any sort of confrontation, any boundaries that needed to be set. He went into them head on like a bull in a china shop. And my mother was the complete opposite. She was raised in a very particular Southern way with very conservative Southern parents, and she embodies grace, and not in the sense that she's passive aggressive, because I think the term passive aggressive gets labeled on anything that's not direct, but indirect and grace doesn't necessarily mean passive aggressive. And so my mother really taught me that, not by explaining it to me, but just through her example and watching how she handled people and situations.
Yeah.
She had a way of letting you know how she felt without telling you that you were wrong or telling you that her way was the right way.
Well, I mean, that's beautiful. Opposites do attract, and I just think that's your parents are a testimony to that, and they've created a very amazing young woman. So they're doing something right. So bravo to them.
Thank you.
I do want to ask one little question because I didn't know this about you. What do you mean you started college at 15, Julie? Please explain that.
So this is kind of, I think, where the fascination with human behavior and human connection started for me, because starting college that early, I was an outsider. I thought it was so cool that I was a 15-year-old in, high school, but I was in college with 19-year-olds taking college classes. And that was my high school experience, a complete outsider. First of all, I couldn't really relate other than a very basic surface level of like, we all have classes and homework, but I couldn't relate to the life experiences of my peers. They truly weren't my peers. I wasn't their peer. I wasn't their equal. And of course, dating was completely off the table because it wasn't legal for any guys in my classes to date me. So I was an outsider. And that fueled my approach to connection as a performance. I wanted to say the right things. I wanted to be respected. I wanted to say the right things. I wanted to be respected. I wanted to feel like I belonged, and I just didn't. And I carried that feeling of being an outsider into my early career. I could speak to a room. I could impress anyone in an interview when it was performative. But as soon as I got into one-on-one conversations, I would just bring it to a grinding halt. I didn't know how to connect outside of a script or a performance. Starting college at that age was great. I mean, it was a great academic experience for me, but it created this gap of human connection that, I ended up studying human development, which is biology and psychology. And that was because I was seeking connection. I didn't quite realize it at the time, but that has kind of fueled that approach through my entire years, that it took me to kind of get back onto level playing field and feel like I belonged.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. When I read that, I was like, I guess if you're in your 40s, you're familiar with Doogie Howser, but I was like, oh my gosh, Julie is like Doogie Howser.
Well, I wasn't in medical school at 15.
But still, going to college at 15, that is a testament to how intelligent you really are. And by looking at you, you would never know that you work in this oil and gas industry. You were once known as the Pitbull in pumps. So I would love to know exactly if you could get into that, like what really led you to the Pitbull and pumps? And then when did you start to feel that wasn't really serving you anymore and you began to shift?
That's a great question. Pitbull and pumps was a term I kind of carried with pride in my early 20s, sort of at the beginning of my oil and gas career. And like I said, I could walk in and speak to a room. I was very confident, and partially because of my academic success and going into a college setting at 15, it gives you quite a boost. You feel like, oh, well, I'm so great. And so that fueled a lot of confidence for me, which was very, very effective working in the oil and gas space. I was one of the only women, so I already had the ability, without doing anything, for people to kind of recognize who I was. You walk into a room, there's 200 suits in one dress. You're at least going to remember that there was a lady there. And so That helped me get into the door, because the first aspect of building a relationship is someone knowing you, just to
Yeah.
be known. And then connection comes on top of that. So I was really celebrated for my ability to just bull in a china shop, which is the skill I learned from my dad. Walk in, do the presentation, get it done, kind of push, maybe even bully people into giving the answers we needed to push our agenda forward and expand our company internationally. So the skills I learned from my dad and the confidence I took from my college experience helped me be able to get things done. But it became a limitation as I started developing as a leader and realized that my voice is not the most valuable one in the room. It's everybody else that's doing the work who I need to learn from to be able to leverage what they're doing and take it and expand it. And there was never a moment where I thought, I need to be more like my mom. I need to embrace grace. I need to come back to emotional intelligence and spiritual wisdom. It happened gradually as I developed as a leader.
Wow. I think, that takes some self-awareness for you to see that and then to walk with those shifts. You've mentioned before to me that we share something in our journey about walking on eggshells and then walking into our worth. So, what are a couple of things that you started to sort of help you sort of soften and sort of shift to that grace?
It was necessity, Cari. I mean, people don't change if they have the option to stay the same.
Ooh, I love that.
The only thing that precipitates change is necessity. It's people hitting rock bottom. It's divorce. It's bankruptcy. It's the loss of a loved one. It takes you down to the core values of who you are, and then that creates the space for transformation. So it was not like I recognized I needed to improve and then I just got better. It was necessity. Yeah. So I'll give you an example. I was outside of Dubai for meetings, and I constantly was traveling at that time in my life to India. And then the deal was we would go to India, spend a week there, and then on our way back to either Europe or the US, stop in Dubai because it's in the same part of the world, short flight. And so I had my technical team with me in India. We went to Dubai, sent the technical team home, and I was there for, kind of high level meetings to talk about global standards, how the American oil industry regulates and how that's different or similar to UAE, and kind of lobby for rule changes that would allow our company to expand in the country. I was not there as a technical person. Engineering team had gone home. And I ended up in a very technical meeting where I was kind of asked to do something that I wasn't capable of doing, or at least not capable of doing really well. And it was quietly communicated to me by my counterpart, like, hey, you can't back away from this. You have to come up with something for them. They're testing you. You're the only girl in the room. You're the only American in the room. Like, you need to step up to this challenge. And so we said, like, let's bring the documents out. Let's bring the drawings out. And I just started asking all of these questions. Things like, do you want to establish a new standard here? Do you want to follow the European standard? Do you want to follow the American standard? And people started giving me all this feedback. And so fast forward through that meeting, it was a very productive back and forth kind of conversation. And anyone who's in business knows those kind of exchanges are what you want. You don't want to be presenting and giving them all this information. They're not even listening. You want a back and forth collaboration. And so I walked away from that exchange with this very productive collaboration. Everyone in the room got to share their input, share how they wanted this system to be designed. And all I did was really facilitate, but I learned so much from that. And that was maybe an inflection point for me to realize that the curiosity-based approach and the question approach was so valuable as a leader. And then it started filtering into my other relationships. I also had a business mentor that would really push me to be more curious about people and not just lead with directives, but to understand. And so the more you become curious about people, the naturally more compassionate you become, and then the more connected you become. So I didn't set out to do it. I just was in situations where there was no other option. And then I learned from those situations how powerful that approach is.
I love that. And, as you're speaking, I'm thinking of how you show up to your community on social media. I mean, you really show up and it is all about connection, and everyone that's watching you, you make them curious. You make them question things, the subjects and the things that you're talking about. So I really feel like that's why you have such a dedicated following as well, is because you are so wonderful at connecting with other people, whether it's on a screen or even like how I met you for the first time at an event. That's something that I don't know, I think is so beautiful and light about you. And I find rare sometimes, today. Speaking of that, you talk about finding your voice without losing your kindness. And one thing I will say is I find you to be a very kind human being. And we live in a world that often equates power with volume. So, what does graceful strength look like to you?
Can you ask that question again, Cari?
So we really live in a world where, all of these little girls are watching us and everyone is loud and they think that's power. And when speaking to you, you talk about finding your voice without losing your kindness in a world that equates power with volume. How does graceful strength look like to you?
I love the term graceful strength.
Oh, I just said it.
I love the term.
Because when I look at you, you are graceful, but you are strong. So it's like you have this graceful strength about you. You are not this loud, you are a powerful female, but you are not this loud woman. You are gracefully strong. So I just want to know, like, what does that look like and how can you inspire others? You have some tips on how to be, embrace our graceful strength.
Yeah, I often talk about balancing grace and authority in the way you set boundaries, in the way you lead conversations, not control conversations. And you just asked about volume. I like to think about command. If you think about command, you think about the military, you think about giving orders. Command talks, command orders. Authority whispers. When you own authentic authority, you don't have to scream it to the world. And in fact, sometimes the quieter you speak, the more people listen. And that's true in a metaphorical and literal sense. Sometimes when I'm teaching workshops, we'll break and everyone kind of moves around and there's side conversations. And then it's time to come back after the break. One of the worst things you can do as a facilitator in those settings is say, okay, come on, everyone, let's come back. And the best thing you can do is to own your space, start speaking quietly, and people immediately come over.
Yeah.
That doesn't work very well with children, so I don't recommend that if you're teaching workshops to children, but adults respond to quiet. Adults respond really well to pauses. People are very uncomfortable with silence, Cari. Yeah. And so when you can hold silence confidently, people naturally lean in and want to follow you. They want to hear what you're going to say next. Silence is such a powerful tool in so many different settings for negotiation. There was a university study about silence that found that the person who's going to have the best outcome in a negotiation is correlated with the person who can tolerate silence the longest. And it's not necessarily just a tactic. I mean, it is a tactic in one sense, but silence also allows all stakeholders in a conversation a chance to share their voice, which is always going to give you a better outcome and a better picture. Just going back to the story when I was in Dubai, everyone had a voice in that room, and we ultimately came up with a better system for them because of that.
Yeah, I love that you say that. And honestly, regarding silence, even in healing, I mean, I have gone silent and that's sort of with my estrangement as well, but it really is, it's led to my empowerment. So everything you just said also just applies to people that are listening and they listen to my podcast about surviving roots. That is a key in healing, is being comfortable with silence and knowing that's where your power lies. I love that you say that.
It's easier said than done.
Of course.
I just want to say that because it's so easy to think about it. It's very hard to put it into practice. And the only way to embody it is to practice it every day. And I say embody, not master, because you can never master it. Human beings have a desire to speak. It's observable from a very, very young age, as young as maybe 1.5, 2 years old. As soon as babies start talking, and you have 2 children, so I know that you've experienced this. What do they start doing? Mommy, mommy, I see a bird. Mommy, mommy, I see a purple flower. Mommy, mommy, I see a truck. They want you to know what they're experiencing. They want to self-disclose to you what's going on in their brain. That is a human desire.
Yeah.
And you're never going to be able to go against that human desire of self-disclosure. Both introverts and extroverts want to talk about the things that are important to them. Even the most antisocial introvert, if you get them talking about, their gym routine or their plants or whatever it is that's important to them, they open up. So just understanding human nature is to self-disclosure. Human nature is to self-disclose. And you're never going to master that desire, but learning to embody quiet through daily practice and just pausing and letting other people just completely finish. For example, an exercise that I sometimes suggest and was suggested to me by one of my mentors was take a day, make sure it's a day where you're not that busy, and your whole goal for that day is for everyone you speak with and interact with, just let them fully finish their thought of what they want to say. Don't do it on a day when you want to get a lot done, because people will talk your ear off. People crave being heard. And when you provide that space, first of all, you're gaining a wealth of information about them and about what drives them. So if you are a leader, this is highly, highly valuable information about how to connect with them, how to motivate them, what their values are. But another thing's going on as they're self-disclosing and as they're talking, their brain is producing dopamine. There was a Harvard study that did functional MRI machines with volunteers for the study. And they had the volunteers answer different questions. And they would get paid for answering, and there's a variety of questions they could choose to answer on each page. And they found that people wanted to answer questions about themselves more than any other question type. They would even take a lower payout to keep talking about themselves, or no payout, just to keep talking about themselves. And the functional MRI machines showed that the dopamine system in their brains were lighting up when they talked about themselves. So when you're letting someone else speak and you're silent, not only are you learning what motivates them and how to connect with them, this brain chemistry is working on them, making them feel good. There was another study, there's a book by Dan Solin called Ask, and he breaks down the neuroscience even more and found that oxytocin is produced in your brain when you talk about yourself. So not only do you feel good, you feel connected to the person you're talking to just because they're listening to.
Yeah. Wow. What is the book name again? I feel like you recommended that book to me one time.
I've recommended it quite a few times on different posts. It's called Ask How to Relate to Anyone. And Dan Solin, he comes from the financial industry, so some of the book is kind of oriented towards financial professionals, but brain chemistry is universal.
Yeah.
It transcends culture, it transcends background. The brain chemistry aspect of that book is so interesting and so widely applicable to any industry, any relationship, whether it's your employees who you want to understand how to motivate them more, or it's your mom and you just want to have a better connection with your mom. So you let her talk and talk and talk about this recipe she loves.
Yeah.
It's any relationship, assuming that it's a healthy relationship.
Right. Assuming it's a healthy one. I actually am going to try this tomorrow. I have to go to an event in Miami, and I blocked out most of the morning and early afternoon, and I'm going to try this. I'm just going to let people talk and I'm just going to listen.
So here's how to use this. You need a follow-up question that's very open-ended. And a great one is, tell me more about that. No matter what someone tells you, when you ask, how are you? And they say good, and I just got a new cat, or we just got a new painting in the house, or I had a great Sunday, we went out on the jet skis. Oh, tell me more about that. I didn't know you had jet skis. Tell me more about that. And just invite people to tell you what they want to tell you. And you see people just light up because no one gets this. Nobody gets this kind of attention. You can really see it when you look at the difference between human speech and social media posts. There was a meta study that looked at data from social media posts and found that 80% of it is self-disclosure. What I did today, what I saw today, what I think about things in the world, 80%. Yet only 30 to 40% of human speech is self-disclosure. And you would think if this is a basic human instinct, they should kind of be neck and neck, right?
Right.
What we post on social media should align with what we say, but we don't have the opportunity in our daily lives to talk 80% about ourselves. We're at work, we're at an event where you have some sort of responsibility to engage in the rules of a polite society and take an interest in others. And so people don't get the opportunity to speak about themselves as much as they want to. We see that they're doing it on social media, 80% of the posts, but yet only maybe maximum of 40% in life. So it just creates this appetite for what you're going to do tomorrow, someone to just ask and be interested.
I'm taking you with me to that event mentally tomorrow, and I'm going to ask people, tell me more about that. I can't wait.
You can't do it with toxic people.
Right.
Or unhealthy relationships where people are trying to control you. That's not the time to use this sort of heart opening form of connection. Those situations, you really have to have much more direct boundaries and protect your peace and protect your space. But when it is people who have good intentions towards you, or people who you really want to build rapport with, because maybe you're going to network with them, or maybe they're your child's friend's parent, or they work for you, this is a great tool to build connection authentically.
I'm so glad you clarified that for everyone listening. I do not want people going to their toxic exes or toxic friendships or calling up a toxic parent asking them to tell them more about that, because I think if you're in that situation, we already know about it way too much anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I really would like to talk about composed communication in real life from everything that's going viral on your Instagram. There are so many posts that people have really connected to and related to, but I have some favorites and I'd like to just like sort of go through a couple of them and get your feedback on some. So one of the most shared reels that you created was about someone scrolling on their phone while you're speaking. Why do moments like that trip us up? And how can we respond without being passive or aggressive?
Mm-hmm. I'd like to separate the term passive aggressive. It's okay.
Okay.
It's okay to be passive. We don't always have to take the lead and take control of a situation. So, for example, we just talked about giving someone the opening, tell me more about that, and letting them take control. That's a passive way to build connection. So not everything passive is passive aggressive, but when you're talking and you're pouring out your heart and you have that space and someone looks at their phone, it is triggering because they're telling you they don't care about what you're saying. Whether they mean to or not, that's what that action, it's called a fub, PHUB. It's a combination word of phone and snub. And that term was coined maybe in the last five or so years. I don't know exactly who coined it. I've been trying to research and figure out when it started, but it's a fairly recent term because it does feel like a snub. The worst thing you can do for connection is to call them out. It's effective if you want them to stop looking at your phone. And it's what feels good is to be like, excuse me, is that more important than I am?
Yeah.
And that will definitely set the boundary that behavior is not okay with you. But it won't continue to build rapport. So if you want to set that boundary and build rapport, just pause, don't say anything, and wait. Again, we're going back to the power of silence. If you can be comfortable in that moment, wait for them to look up. And most adults will look up. Teenagers, not so much. This doesn't really work well with teenagers. They need more very clear verbal instructions. But with adults, they'll be doing whatever they're doing, and you're just waiting. And in your mind, you have to stop the negative dialogue telling you, I'm not important to them, they're a rude person, they're a bad person, and give yourself a positive dialogue. Because if you want connection with them, you have to see them in a positive light. Give yourself a positive dialogue with the benefit of the doubt. Maybe that's their child's school and there's an alert, or maybe that's their spouse texting them about an issue. So just wait until they look up, and they'll immediately look up and realize what they were doing and feel so bad and go, oh, I'm sorry. And at that point, you can just continue the conversation. You don't have to say anything. Just continue with what you were talking about. If they don't look up and they don't apologize, or if they look up and don't apologize and they're still kind of in their own world, you can just ask, may I continue? Asking them for
I love that.
permission is so unpopular. Modern communication tells us we don't need someone else's permission to be who we want to be and say what we want to say. And that's true, you don't. But if you want to build connection with someone, you do need their buy-in. So,
Yeah.
may I continue? That could be perceived as a little bit passive aggressive. So you kind of have to use that one. I prefer to say nothing in general, but may I continue? It's a little bit passive aggressive, but it gets the point across that the behavior is not okay and you were in the middle of something.
Okay. I love that you go back to silence again, just, demonstrating the power of silence. I love that.
You truly don't know what's going on in someone's world.
Right.
People are going through so much in their day to day. Everyone is so busy, especially women. We have so much on our
Yeah.
plate between family, work, content, social media. There's so much pressure on so many women out there that are trying to do maybe a main business, maybe a side business, maybe they're writing a book, maybe they're volunteering
Yeah.
at church or their children's school, and possibly working a full or part-time job on top of it. So giving grace is more than just the words you say. It's your heart towards other people. It's not giving them what they deserve, which is a verbal shutdown. Excuse me, that's rude. And giving them what they don't deserve, which is the benefit of the doubt.
Let's talk about nonverbal boundaries. What should people pay attention to in body language, both theirs and others, when trying to maintain composed communication?
Oh man, that is a layered topic. There's so much in body language. The very, very basic, I would say, like starter pack for connection body language is mirroring. If you want to connect with someone, do what they're doing. If they're leaning back in their chair and they're crossing their leg, sit in a relaxed way and match their energy. If they're leaning in and their hands are on their thighs and their eyes are wide open, then don't lean back. Body language is so contextual across different cultures. There are some things that are sort of universal, like if you're sitting with your arms crossed, that's not open body language. People are not going to want to open up to you. But the nuances of body language are highly cultural and highly contextual. So I think mirroring is a great tool for connecting with anyone, and it's very universally applicable. The thing I will say about it is don't do it right away. So if you're mirroring someone and they're talking with their hands, don't immediately lift your hands up. You can just do one gesture, give it like a 2-sentence delay. They're talking, they pass the buck to you, you talk, and then you start bringing the gestures up that they're using. That's a great way to connect with people and to come off as more charismatic that anyone can do. Just pay attention to them and do what they're doing.
I love that. And don't do it right away.
Yeah, and the added benefit here, just going back to the neuroscience, is when you're deeply paying attention to someone and you are being an observer of not only what they're saying, but their body language, their posture, how they're talking, that intent level of focus is going to make them feel listened to. So then you've got your dopamine system, your oxytocin system working for you.
Okay. I have another one that I've been dying to ask you. How do you recommend people deflect backhanded compliments or intrusive questions with tact but firmness?
Okay, let's talk about one and then the other. Let's talk about
Okay.
backhanded compliments, and then we'll circle around to intrusive questions because my recommendations are completely different for those.
Okay.
Backhanded compliments, one of the best things you can do is just don't take it as a backhanded compliment. So for example, if someone says, "Oh, well, aren't you smart?" That's a backhanded compliment. It doesn't feel good. But if you take all of their tone out of it and respond with something like, "Oh, thank you," it completely kills it. All they want is for you to feed into their negativity. And so if you don't do that and you respond to just the words they said with no tone at all, "Oh, thank you," that works really well. I was raised in the South. Both my parents are from Alabama. As I said, my mom was raised very properly. There was a secret in the South for many years of, "Oh, bless your heart." And so word is out on that. Everybody kind of knows what "oh, bless your heart" means. But "oh, thank you," is kind of another way without using those words to express that same thing. Another good one, for example, if someone says, so what was my last one? Oh, aren't you smart? If they're talking about a thing, well, that was a great pitch. You walk out of a meeting, you didn't maybe do the best job. Well, that was a great pitch, a backhanded compliment. You can respond with, I thought so. Just don't engage in the negativity. That's all they're going for, is to get you riled up. And so
Yeah.
if you're able to put your own ego aside, not engage in the insult, and just simply respond to the compliment, it almost always just nips it in the bud. People have
Yeah.
nothing to say. Another one that I really like if you're in the South is, aren't you sweet? Along the same lines of, bless your heart, well, aren't you sweet? So that one's good for if someone's like giving you unsolicited advice. I would have really added a little bit more seasoning to that dish. Or, your decor in this room is so interesting. Aren't you sweet? Just don't engage in the negativity at all.
Yeah. It all of everything you're saying really comes that I'm hearing just comes back to self-control and just knowing your power, the silence and the way we react to others. It all comes back to just our self-control.
And what you just said was knowing your power. And that's even more meaningful to me than self-control,
Yeah.
because you mentioned walking on eggshells, and I want to talk about that here. If someone is being mean to you or belittling you, and you're walking on eggshells and you don't know what to say, you feel it in your gut. It feels like, I want to say butterflies, but in a bad way. You don't know what to say. You're questioning every word. You don't feel safe. Whereas when you know your power and you know that that person's opinion of you is not what defines you, you feel it in your chest. You feel in control. You feel powerful. You feel compassionate and loving to that person who, for whatever reason, is hurting and is taking that hurt out on you. You don't have to put them in your place. You feel it radiating from your chest, just that sense of authentic authority and power. And that's the difference between walking on eggshells, where it comes from fear and like, oh, they were just mean to me. Should I call them out, or should I just ignore it, or should I passive aggressively respond? Once you embody the idea that you can give grace to others, that no one is perfect, and that you're not requiring them to be perfect. They're on their journey, you're on your journey, and we're all in the process of growing. It's so freeing, and it gives you so much power to extend that grace and not give people what they deserve, not politely put them in their place. And when you do that, people are oftentimes very, very moved. Not so much with like social media comments, people make mean comments and they always fight in the comments. And anytime there's viral content, that's something totally different. But when you are face to face with someone and they give you the option to put them in their place or give them grace, when you give them grace, it opens such a door to the relationship.
Wow, that's such good advice for everyone listening. You're busy. You are juggling a lot. You wear many different hats. And one time in our conversation, speaking of walking, you mentioned that you and your husband, because you own businesses together as well, you have this morning walk ritual. How does that daily rhythm help sustain like a healthy marriage and a healthy mindset?
I'm glad you asked about that. I want to talk about this, and it's specifically going back to the book Ask. One of the tenets in that book, and what I just suggested you try, is the tell me more about that question and how that activates people's brain chemistry to create dopamine and to create oxytocin and create that feeling of being bonded to you. The only thing that matters when you use that approach is that it's genuine. It does not matter if they know that you read the book Ask. It doesn't matter if they read the book Ask too. It still works as long as you genuinely care about them. And the reason I know this is because every morning my husband and I walk the lake and we talk about what's going on in the different businesses and we use it. Tell me more about that. I know when he's asking that question that it's the question from the book Ask. It's the question I use with people all the time. Yet I also know he's genuinely interested. So those walks help so much with clarity for me every day, and just being able to talk to someone that cares about your outcome
Yeah,
is powerful emotional fuel.
love that. I love that. I want to get into your self-care a little bit more because you mentioned it one time in a conversation that it's integrated. so that you don't need to decompress so much at the end of every day because you hold boundaries all day long.
Mhm.
For everyone listening, I just feel like that's so important that you say that your self-care has become integrated. Can you speak to that evolution?
Yes. And I do still decompress at the end of the day, but not to the degree that maybe I once needed to. It's definitely been a journey. There was a rock bottom point in my life, as I think many people who've just been in relationships and been in toxic work environments and had estranged family relationships. Everyone has had that point where they were at their lowest. You either stay in that space and you're miserable, or you start finding things that help you feel better. And for me, that was gratitude journaling. There were years of my life where I would write 3 pages every morning. It was gratitude, goals, and prayers. And I fully wrote 3 pages every morning, and that was all I could do to start my day. That was the only part of the day where I felt calm and in control, was when I was writing that. And I was in the most toxic work environment you could possibly imagine. It was sexual harassment on a daily basis. It was age discrimination on a daily basis. Yet I was thriving in that job despite all of that, because I was a pit bull in pumps and I would just go, go, go. And ultimately, that crushed me.
Yeah.
And it was gratitude, goals, and prayers every single day that brought me through a transformation to the person I am today. And I still start every single day with gratitude. It's a little bit more brief. It's not 3 full pages, but I also systematically through my day am going back to rewriting the goals and refining the goals and approaching every single conversation and relationship based on the goal. Not which is so much bigger than like, well, how do I want to feel? Do I want to feel like my ego is being stroked in this conversation? Or do I want to know that we've moved closer to motivating this person based on their values to the outcome we need?
Yeah.
So I look at goals much more granularly now and much more relationally. And prayers are a constant part of it. It's giving it to God when it's something I can't control, instead of harboring it and worrying it and festering with it. And so then at the end of the day, I think because I'm systematically doing that at so many of these inflection points throughout the day, it's not as stacked up on me.
I love that you mentioned writing because there's something about saying something out loud or putting it on paper where you see that things are not as big or as scary or as hard. Like they're so much smaller than you. So there's such a power in that of just getting it out and putting it on paper or saying it out loud. So I love that you use that as part of your rituals. And thank you for sharing because I think a lot of people, I don't know, I don't think, yeah, I think you have to try it to see the power in it.
There's a concept in neurolinguistic programming where you pull yourself back from your timeline. So you imagine your life as a timeline, and we're in it. Like I'm in today in my timeline. So you pull yourself back and you look at your timeline as if it's on a sheet of paper. And then you go back further and your timeline looks smaller and smaller. And you go back further and further and further until you see your entire life on a sheet of paper. And it's exactly what you just said. It makes it so much smaller and more manageable, creating distance from yourself and the pain. You step back, you get away from it, you look at it as this week of my life or this day of my life is one day in my life. And you step back from the timeline. And the further back you are, the more distance you have from the event that you're probably feeling really strongly in the moment in that day, it becomes less important. And it becomes less of an immediate priority to your just basic functioning and willingness to get out of bed that day. And I found that myself when I was at my lowest point in life, was writing it down created distance from it. I mean, you're physically separated from that sheet of paper. So there's that aspect to it too. It's not just in your head. It's not a part of you anymore. It's separate from you. And I think that helps on a subconscious level.
Maybe that's why I'm writing a book and you as well.
Mm-hmm.
Seriously.
Yes.
I mean, I love that you mentioned timeline. And on that note of timeline, if you could go back and whisper one thing to little Julie, to younger Julie, the one that was still like learning who she was, what would you tell her now?
You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to be right all the time. that is in fact the opposite. It's kind of a barrier to connection and relationships. Being open to other people's right answers and other people's lived experiences and life and cultural contexts, being curious about it and connecting with it is the way to build a more connected, happy life. But I was just so focused on the performance aspect of school and career and get the right answer and say the right thing and impress everyone, thinking that that would lead me to belong.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't.
I can relate to that. I love that you say that, though, but I can definitely relate to that. To end this beautiful conversation that I know my listeners are going to take so much from and connect with you so much, for people that see you so perfectly composed, I just want to end on something fun. What's something totally unexpected or messy about Julie Helms, like what we would never expect?
Messy? Well, there's a lot messy about me. I will tell you. Okay, I have a good one. We have like pretty traditional marriage roles in our traditional in the sense that like I do the cooking, he takes out the trash, that sort of thing, but I never do laundry. I will let the laundry pile up, carry in the basket, and then like push it down and just keep putting more and more in there.
Oh, I hate laundry.
I will do laundry like once a month, but so my husband always does the laundry.
God,
He's a
I'm
gem.
making my husband listen to this episode.
But another one that might surprise you, and this one might be fun for people who are listening, is I'm not afraid of buying something from the store and kind of putting it on my own platter and bringing it to a dinner or a potluck. I'm like all about box mixes if that's what gets you in the kitchen baking. I'm also all about going by the bakery and put it on your own platter. Don't say you made it, but just let people make their own assumptions. That's something I would do that maybe you wouldn't expect.
I would never have expected that from you. I would imagine you having an apron for every occasion.
Which I do.
The right place, the right every little thing, and showing up or hosting a dinner party that looks like it belongs in a lifestyle book. I do the same thing, but I do lie and say that I made it. So maybe I will have a better conscience moving forward and admit that it was bakery bought. But I
Embrace silence, Cari. You don't have to say it. Just embrace the silence, show up, it's on your plate, and let people make their own assumptions. Silence is your best tool in almost every situation.
It really is. Silence has been my best friend for a while. So I think everyone should learn to embrace silence. So Julie, I just want to thank you for your honesty, your insight, and composure that you have brought to this conversation, because you remind us that power doesn't have to be loud to be strong, and that grace is not weakness, and that you can lead with soul. So to everyone listening, if you took something from this episode, share it with a friend who's learning to stop walking on eggshells or who's wanting to start standing in their truth. And don't forget to follow Julie on Instagram. What is your handle, Julie? Where can people find you?
It's Julie Ann French Fry. So Julie Ann with an E, Anne, and then French Fry, just like French fries. That was my childhood nickname that my dad always called me, Julie Ann French Fry.
Oh my God. That is so sweet. She is full of wisdom, composed communication, boundaries, bold elegance in everyday life. Julie, I adore you, and I just want to thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Surviving Roots. I hope it gave you something meaningful to carry with you. Let's keep this conversation going. Find me on Instagram at cari.fund, where I'll share more from the show. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with someone who needs it. And remember, we are the choices that we make.